During a high-level Navy ceremony, Admiral Wesley Hargrove publicly humiliates Commander Zephyr Thorne, mocking her suspiciously thin service record and hinting she advanced through luck rather than merit. As laughter echoes through the hall, Thorne remains expressionless. When Hargrove attempts to display her full file for transparency, the system freezes with a flashing red alert. Classified, level Omega, access denied. The room falls silent. No one moves. What kind of administrative officer merits the highest classification level in military intelligence? From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoy stories about unsung heroes and the true meaning of service, please consider subscribing. New stories every week. The grand ballroom of the Naval Academy at Annapolis gleamed under crystal chandeliers, reflecting off the polished brass buttons and medals that adorned the dress blues of America's naval elite. The annual Excellence in Service ceremony represented the pinnacle of recognition, where careers were celebrated and legends cemented. In the fourth row, Commander Zephyr Thorne sat with perfect posture, her uniform pristine, but noticeably bare compared to the decorated officers surrounding her. Commander Thorne's appearance was unremarkable by design. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, not a strand out of place. Her uniform fit precisely to standard measurements, neither too loose nor too tailored. Even her expression remained neutral, a calm lake without ripples. The only distinctive feature, if anyone looked closely enough, was her eyes, gray like storm clouds and just as watchful. "Another year of watching the brass pat themselves on the back," whispered Lieutenant Commander Davis from the seat beside her. "Must be nice to have something worth celebrating." Thorne offered a polite nod without engaging further. She had grown accustomed to the side comments and thinly veiled curiosity. 17 years of service with remarkably little to show for it made her an anomaly, and the Navy, like nature, distrusted anomalies. At the front of the ballroom, Admiral Wesley Hargrove entered with his entourage of aides and junior officers. At 62, the Admiral carried himself with the confidence of a man who had spent his life collecting power and influence like others collected stamps. His chest was a constellation of ribbons and medals, each with a story he was eager to tell at officers' functions. The wrinkles at the corners of his eyes deepened when he smiled, which was primarily reserved for those who could advance his ambitions. The ceremony began with the traditional naval hymn, followed by the presentation of colors. Admiral Hargrove took to the podium, his voice filling the room with practiced authority. "For over 200 years, the United States Navy has stood as the shield of our nation and the sword of our democracy," he began, scanning the audience with the practiced gaze of a man accustomed to commanding attention. "Today, we recognize those who exemplify the highest standards of naval excellence." As the ceremony progressed, officers were called forward one by one. Commanders who had led successful deployments in contested waters. Lieutenants who had shown exceptional courage under fire. Each recipient approached the stage to enthusiastic applause, each medal pinned with a firm handshake and words of personal recognition from Admiral Hargrove. From the back of the room, Intelligence Officer Ronan Blackwood watched the proceedings with particular interest. Unlike the other attendees, his attention wasn't on the stage, but fixed on Commander Thorne. When she shifted slightly in her seat, his eyes tracked the movement. When an aide whispered something to her, he noted the exchange. His presence was so understated that few would notice him at all, which was precisely the point. "Commander Zephyr Thorne," the announcer finally called. "Administrative Excellence and Support Services Commendation." A ripple of whispers followed her name. Administrative Excellence. The polite way of recognizing desk duty, supply chain management, paperwork. The invisible machinery of naval operations that no one joined the service to perform. Thorne rose from her seat and approached the stage with a fluid economy of movement that seemed at odds with her administrative designation. There was nothing excessive in her stride, nothing wasted. She ascended the steps, stood at attention before Admiral Hargrove, and saluted with textbook precision. "Commander Thorne," Hargrove said, returning the salute before pinning the modest commendation to her uniform. 17 years of service to our great Navy." "Thank you, sir," she replied, her voice clear and neutral. But instead of the customary handshake and dismissal, Admiral Hargrove did not step back. He remained uncomfortably close, studying her with narrowed eyes that suggested this deviation from protocol was far from impromptu. You know, Commander, your file crossed my desk last month during the promotion committee review, he said, loud enough for the first several rows to hear clearly. I found it fascinating reading. The audience grew silent. This was not part of the ceremony script. Thorne remained at attention, her expression unchanged despite the public scrutiny. 3 years at the Academy with unremarkable standings, Hargrove continued, producing a digital tablet from his aide, followed by a series of administrative assignments, supply chain coordination, personnel file management. He scrolled through the tablet with exaggerated motion. Your file contains more redactions than actual content, Commander. Pages of blacked-out text. A few uncomfortable chuckles rose from the audience. Most officers kept their eyes fixed forward, recognizing the danger of being drawn into whatever game the Admiral was playing. Tell us, Commander Thorne, Hargrove said, his voice taking on, a theatrical quality that filled the ballroom. Is naval excellence achieved through paperwork these days? Have the standards changed so dramatically that filing reports merits recognition alongside combat leadership? More laughter now, emboldened by the Admiral's open mockery. Thorne stood perfectly still, neither defending herself nor showing any sign that his words had landed. This seeming indifference only appeared to irritate Hargrove further. In fact, he said, turning to address the audience directly, I believe we deserve transparency in our awards process. I've requested Commander Thorne's complete service record. He held up his tablet. Perhaps we should all see what merits such remarkable advancement through our ranks. The tension in the room was palpable. Junior officers exchanged glances, while senior leadership maintained carefully neutral expressions. In the back of the room, Intelligence Officer Blackwood had straightened, his hand moving subtly toward the secure phone in his pocket. For the first time since taking the stage, Commander Thorne spoke unprompted. Admiral, I believe my service record speaks for itself. Her words carried no defensiveness, no challenge, yet something in her tone caused several senior officers to shift uncomfortably in their seats. Admiral Hargrove, however, only smirked as he tapped his tablet to display her file on the main projection screen behind the stage. The expectant silence was broken by a harsh electronic tone as the system froze. The screen flickered, and then a red alert box appeared. Classified, level Omega, access denied. Admiral Hargrove's expression transformed from smug certainty to confusion. He tapped the tablet again, more forcefully. The same alert flashed, followed by a system-wide lockdown that spread across the digital displays throughout the ballroom. Even the lighting system flickered momentarily. What is the meaning of this? Hargrove demanded, turning to his communications officer. Override the security protocol. This is a direct order. I cannot do that, sir, the young officer replied, his voice tight with tension. The system has initiated a Pentagon-level security lockdown. This isn't coming from our network. Throughout the ballroom, officers rose to their feet, murmuring in confusion. Security personnel moved to the doors, their hands instinctively moving to their sidearms. Commander Thorne remained at attention, her eyes now fixed on a point at the back of the room, where Blackwood stood, his phone now pressed to his ear. A senior admiral approached Hargrove, leaning in to whisper urgently. Wes, what have you done? Omega clearance doesn't officially exist. What do you mean it doesn't exist? Hargrove hissed back. It's flashing on every screen in the room. That's exactly my point, the senior admiral replied. Whatever you've accessed is beyond any classification level acknowledged in naval regulations. This isn't just classified, it's something else entirely. For the first time since the ceremony began, a flicker of uncertainty crossed Admiral Hargrove's face. He turned back to Commander Thorne, who remained at perfect attention despite the chaos unfolding around her. Commander, he said, his voice lower now, what exactly is your actual role in this Navy? Before Thorne could answer, her personal phone vibrated in her pocket. Without breaking protocol, without even looking down, she knew exactly what the message would say and what it would mean for her team. For 17 years, she had maintained her cover with perfect discipline. Now, because of one man's ego, everything was at risk. Sir, she responded, her voice betraying nothing of her thoughts. I serve wherever the Navy requires my skills. Admiral Hargrove stared at her, searching for any crack in her composure, any tell that might reveal what lay beneath the unremarkable exterior of this administrative officer, whose file had somehow triggered the highest security protocol in the United States military. Finding none, he finally stepped back. "This ceremony is temporarily suspended," he announced to the room. All personnel returned to quarters until further notice. As the crowd dispersed in ordered confusion, Commander Thorne descended from the stage with the same measured precision with which she had approached it. No one noticed that she took a slightly different exit than most, or that Intelligence Officer Blackwood followed at a careful distance. In her sparse quarters, Commander Thorne finally removed her phone from her pocket. The message displayed was exactly as she had feared. Horizon compromised, assets exposed, awaiting instructions. She deleted the message immediately and began methodically removing all personal items from her quarters. 17 years of careful work, of missions that had saved countless lives, of operations that could never see the light of day, all now hanging by a thread because one admiral couldn't resist the opportunity to publicly embarrass a quiet woman who didn't fit his idea of what a naval officer should be. Across the base, Admiral Hargrove stormed into his office with his protege, Commander Vance Merrick, close behind. "Find everything on Thorne," he ordered, slamming his cover down on the desk. "Academy records, mission logs, personnel evaluations, everything. I want to know why a paperwork pusher has a security clearance that made the Pentagon itself sit up and take notice." "Sir," Merrick hesitated. "If her file triggered an Omega classification, looking further might be—" "Are you questioning a direct order, Commander?" Hargrove cut in, his voice dangerously soft. "No, sir," Merrick replied. "I'll begin immediately." As night fell over Annapolis, 2 investigations began in parallel, one seeking to expose a mystery, the other racing to contain a breach that could unravel 2 decades of the most classified operations in American military history. Commander Vance Merrick sat alone in his office, the blue glow of his computer screen illuminating his face in the darkness. The rest of the administrative building had emptied hours ago, but the Admiral's orders had been clear. Find everything on Thorne. Everything. 3 hours into his search, patterns began to emerge, or rather, the absence of patterns. Commander Zephyr Thorne's official record was a masterpiece of bureaucratic camouflage. Her academy transcripts showed a student who had graduated in the middle of her class, neither excelling nor failing in any particular area. Her subsequent assignments followed a logical progression through administrative roles, each building on the last, each unremarkable. But the gaps were telling. Training records that should have existed were missing. Deployment schedules showed inexplicable blank periods. Mission reports that mentioned her name in passing were heavily redacted, sometimes with her name as the only visible text on an otherwise blacked-out page. "This isn't a service record," Merrick muttered to himself. "It's a ghost story." He accessed the personnel database using his command clearance, searching for performance evaluations from Thorne's superior officers. The system returned 0 results. He tried again with a broader search parameter. Again, nothing. It was as if Commander Thorne had served 17 years without ever being evaluated. A bureaucratic impossibility. Merrick leaned back in his chair, rubbing his tired eyes. Whatever game Commander Thorne was playing, she had been playing it for a very long time, and with the apparent cooperation of officers at the highest levels of naval command. His secure phone buzzed with a message from Admiral Hargrove. "Progress report, Aero 700 tomorrow." Merrick typed a brief reply confirming the meeting time, then continued his search. If the official records wouldn't yield answers, perhaps unofficial channels would. Across the base, Commander Thorne moved through her quarters with methodical efficiency. Personal photographs, the few she allowed herself, were removed from frames and fed into a small thermal disintegrator. Books were packed into a standard-issue duffel bag, except for 3 volumes that she placed in a separate waterproof case. Her dress uniform was hung with precision in the closet, while civilian clothes were folded into the duffel. From beneath her mattress, she retrieved a secure satellite phone distinct from her military-issued device. The message waiting for her was encrypted with a protocol that changed daily. After verifying the authentication sequence, she read, "Horizon protocol activated. Assets secure. Await further instructions at DO 600. She deleted the message and disassembled the phone, separating the battery and SIM card. Tomorrow would determine whether 17 years of work could be salvaged or whether Ghost Division would need to disappear entirely, along with everyone who knew of its existence. Dawn broke over Annapolis with a steel gray sky that matched Commander Thorne's eyes. The officers' mess hall was already bustling with activity when she entered, tray in hand. Conversations quieted momentarily as she passed, then resumed with greater intensity. News of yesterday's ceremony incident had spread throughout the base overnight, transforming from embarrassment to mystery with each retelling. "I heard her file crashed the entire Pentagon network," one ensign whispered too loudly. "My roommate says she's internal affairs, investigating corruption in senior command," another replied. Commander Thorne selected her breakfast with the same efficiency that characterized all her movements: protein, complex carbohydrates, fruit. No wasted calories, no unnecessary choices. She was halfway through her meal when the mess hall fell silent again, this time for Admiral Hargrove's entrance. He surveyed the room with practiced authority before his eyes locked onto Thorne. Without hesitation, he strode directly to her table and stood over her, clearly expecting her to stand at attention. She did not. "Commander," he said, his voice pitched to carry across the now silent hall, "I believe military protocol requires you to stand in the presence of a superior officer." Thorne placed her fork down precisely and looked up at him. "Naval regulations state that personnel actively consuming a meal in a designated mess facility are exempted from standing protocols unless directly addressed for official business." She paused, then added, "Is this official business, Admiral?" Several officers nearby stifled reactions. The regulation existed, but few junior officers would dare cite it to an admiral's face. Hargrove's complexion darkened slightly. "Whatever game you're playing, Commander, it ends now," he said, lowering his voice but maintaining its intensity. "Your mysterious file won't save you from proper scrutiny." "I wasn't aware I was playing a game, sir," Thorne replied evenly. "I was under the impression I was serving my country." Hargrove leaned in closer. 17 years of pencil pushing doesn't warrant an Omega classification. I'll find out what you're hiding, and when I do—" He was interrupted by the mess hall doors opening to admit a solidly built man in his 60s, wearing the unmistakable bearing of a Marine even in his civilian clothes. Several officers recognized retired Marine General Marcus Vega and straightened instinctively. Vega scanned the room, his weathered face impassive until his eyes landed on Thorne. He instantly came to attention, his posture shifting as if he were in full-dress uniform rather than khakis and a button-down shirt. The room went completely still. A retired general was standing at attention for a commander. Admiral Hargrove turned to witness this breach of protocol, his expression flickering between confusion and outrage. Without acknowledging him, General Vega maintained his stance until Thorne gave an almost imperceptible nod. Only then did he relax and continue to the serving line. "We'll continue this discussion later, Commander," Hargrove said, his voice tight with suppressed anger as he departed. When he was gone, General Vega approached Thorne's table with a tray of his own. "May I join you, Commander?" "Of course, General," she replied, gesturing to the empty seat across from her. Vega sat down and leaned forward. "Never thought I'd see Wraith in the daylight. Things must be serious." Thorne's expression remained neutral, but her voice dropped to a near whisper. "That name doesn't exist anymore, General." "Some names can't be erased," Vega replied, "no matter how many files are redacted." He glanced around the still watchful mess hall. "I heard about yesterday's incident. The old bulldog finally bit something that might bite back." "Nothing is biting back," Thorne said. "The situation is contained." Vega raised an eyebrow. "Is it? Because I also heard someone's been digging into Cairo." Thorne's fork paused halfway to her mouth, the only indication that his words had affected her. Cairo had been the code name for a hostage extraction in North Africa 7 years ago, an operation that officially never happened, conducted by a team that officially didn't exist, saving 37 diplomatic personnel who officially were never in danger. "Who told you that?" she asked. "I still have friends in interesting places," Vega replied. "Friends who are concerned about certain files being accessed by individuals without proper clearance." "Thank you for the information, General," Thorne said, rising from the table. "It was good seeing you again." "Commander," Vega called as she turned to leave. When she looked back, his expression was solemn. "Watch your six. Not everyone who wears stars remembers what it means to serve." Thorne nodded once and left, aware of the eyes following her exit. The game, as Hargrove had called it, was accelerating beyond containment. She needed to warn her team. In a secure facility 200 miles away, a young analyst stared at her monitor with growing alarm. The system had flagged multiple unauthorized search attempts against classified operations, all originating from Annapolis Naval Base. Someone was systematically searching for information on operations in Cairo, Montevideo, and Sevastopol, all Ghost Division deployments. "Sir," she called to her supervisor, "I'm tracking a potential security breach. Someone's looking for Ghost Division." The supervisor approached her station, his expression darkening as he reviewed the data. "How many files have been accessed?" "None successfully, sir. The system is blocking the requests, but they're getting more targeted with each attempt. Whoever this is, they know enough to be dangerous." "Alert Blackwood," the supervisor ordered, "and initiate a trace on the source terminal." The analyst nodded and began typing rapidly. On her secondary monitor, surveillance footage from Annapolis showed Commander Merrick accessing the classified archives, his expression intent as he worked through the night. In his quarters, Intelligence Officer Ronan Blackwood reviewed the security alert with growing concern. The breach was coming from within command structure, specifically from Admiral Hargrove's protege. This was no longer a simple matter of curiosity or wounded pride. This was becoming an active threat to operational security. His secured line rang, displaying a caller ID that hadn't appeared in years. He answered immediately. "This is Blackwood." "It's Wraith," Commander Thorne's voice came through, using a call sign that had been retired with her last field operation. "We have a situation." "I'm aware," Blackwood replied. "Your cover's been compromised." "Not just mine," Thorne said. "Someone's been looking into Cairo, Montevideo, and Sevastopol." Blackwood closed his eyes briefly. "Those operations are still classified at the highest levels." "For good reason," Thorne replied. "If those files are exposed, it won't just be Ghost Division at risk. It'll be the operatives still in place, the assets who helped us, the diplomatic arrangements that prevented 3 different international incidents." "What do you need from me?" "Time," Thorne said. "I need to contact the team. If our identities are compromised, they need to activate their contingency protocols." "I'll do what I can," Blackwood promised. "But Hargrove is pushing this hard. He's embarrassed and angry, which makes him dangerous." "He has no idea what dangerous really is," Thorne replied, ending the call. In her quarters, Thorne activated her emergency communication protocol. One by one, she contacted the members of Ghost Division, operatives who, like her, had lived under deep cover for years, their real capabilities and missions hidden behind mundane official roles. Her call to Lieutenant Kestrel came last. Of all her team, Kestrel had maintained the deepest cover, working as an intelligence analyst at the Pentagon, with access to the very systems now being used to hunt them. "Commander," Kestrel answered, her voice tense. "We have a problem." "How bad?" Thorne asked. "They're digging into everything. Cairo, Montevideo, Sevastopol. The team is exposed. If they get past the security firewalls—" "They won't," Thorne interrupted. "Not yet, but we need to prepare for the possibility." "What's the play?" Thorne considered her options. Protocol dictated that Ghost Division should disappear at the first sign of exposure. New identities, new covers, abandoning years of carefully built networks and intelligence. But something about this felt wrong. Admiral Hargrove was persistent. But he wasn't a traitor. His actions were driven by ego, not malice. "Hold positions for now," Thorne decided. "Secure all communication channels and prepare emergency exfiltration protocols, but do not activate without direct confirmation from me." "Understood, Commander," Kestrel replied, then hesitated. "Permission to speak. Thou freely?" "Granted. In all the years I've served with you, I've never seen you hesitate to follow protocol. Why now?" Thorne looked out her window at the Naval Academy grounds, where generations of officers had trained to serve their country openly, proudly wearing their accomplishments for all to see. Ghost Division had chosen a different path: service without recognition, sacrifice without acknowledgement. "Because sometimes the mission isn't about disappearing," Thorne said finally. "Sometimes it's about standing your ground." After ending the call, Thorne moved to her closet and pulled out a footlocker secured with a biometric lock. Her palm on the scanner caused the lock to disengage with a soft click. Inside lay the physical evidence of a career that officially didn't exist. Advanced tactical gear, multiple passports with her photo under different names, currency from a dozen countries, and a collection of weapons more sophisticated than standard Navy issue. As she examined the contents, her secure phone lit up with a final message. CENTCOM advisory. Termination protocol under consideration. Containment. Failure imminent. Thorne's expression hardened. The termination protocol wasn't about ending jobs or missions. It was about erasing Ghost Division entirely, and everyone who knew of its existence. She had 24 hours to prevent a disaster of her own government's making. Lifting her secure phone, she made one final call. "This is Wraith. Authorization code Sierra Echo Alpha Lima. The protocol has been breached. I need to speak to CENTCOM immediately." A voice responded after a brief pause. "Commander Thorne, you've been compromised. Termination protocol is in effect." "Not yet," Thorne said firmly. "I can contain this." "You have 24 hours," the voice replied. "After that, Ghost Division never existed. And neither did you." Thorne ended the call and turned to the photos visible in her footlocker. Images of her team in various disguises, in desert terrain, in Arctic conditions, in formal diplomatic settings. The final image showed her leading a team of shadowy figures toward a compound under night vision. 17 years of service, none of which would ever appear in history books. Unless she failed to contain this breach, then their operations would become public in the worst possible way, endangering lives and diplomatic relations across the globe. Admiral Hargrove had no idea what he had set in motion with his public humiliation attempt. But he would soon learn exactly who he had challenged and why some things stayed classified for a reason. Admiral Wesley Hargrove stood at the head of the conference table, his uniform immaculate, his bearing rigid with authority. Around him sat his senior staff, their expressions carefully neutral, as he presented the results of Commander Merrick's investigation. 17 years ago, Commander Zephyr Thorne graduated from this very academy with unremarkable scores and a personality profile that suggested limited leadership potential. Hargrove began, displaying Thorne's academy photo on the main screen. She was assigned to administrative services, where she should have remained for a standard 4-year rotation before either advancing or separating from service. He tapped his tablet, and the display changed to show a timeline with glaring inconsistencies highlighted in red. Instead, we find these anomalies. In 2007, Commander Thorne was supposedly managing supply logistics for the Pacific Fleet. Yet here, he pointed to a highlighted section, we have a 2-month gap where she filed no reports and appears in no communication logs. In 2011, another gap coinciding with the diplomatic crisis in Cairo. In 2015, she disappears from all records during the Sevastopol incident. The senior officers exchanged glances. Each incident mentioned had been a flashpoint of international tension that had mysteriously de-escalated without public explanation. "I believe we have an infiltrator in our ranks," Hargrove continued, his voice hardening. "Someone using an administrative cover to access sensitive information. Someone who has manipulated the system to advance without scrutiny, possibly compromising national security in the process." Commander Merrick stood beside the Admiral, his face betraying conflict, as he presented the technical evidence he had compiled. The security classification that prevented access to Commander Thorne's complete file is not part of the standard military classification system. It appears to be a specialized protocol that overrides even the highest normal security clearances. "In other words," Hargrove interjected, "someone has placed this officer outside the chain of command and accountability that every other service member answers to. I intend to find out who authorized this breach of protocol and why." As he built his case with growing intensity, the doors to the conference room suddenly locked with an audible electronic click. The lights dimmed momentarily before stabilizing at a lower intensity. Every screen in the room displayed the same message: "Security protocol engaged." "What is the meaning of this?" Hargrove demanded, looking to his communications officer. Before anyone could respond, Intelligence Officer Ronan Blackwood entered through a side door that should have been secured, accompanied by 2 members of Naval Security who positioned themselves at strategic points in the room. Blackwood's typically unassuming demeanor had vanished, replaced by the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to command. "Admiral Hargrove," Blackwood stated, his voice calm but unyielding. "You have accessed classified materials beyond your clearance level, potentially compromising operations critical to national security." Hargrove drew himself up to his full height. I am the commanding officer of this installation, Blackwood. You have no authority to interrupt a senior staff briefing or to accuse me of security violations. Whatever game Commander Thorne is playing, I suggest you distance yourself from it immediately if you value your career. This isn't about rank, Admiral, Blackwood replied evenly. It's about national security. The room fell silent as a secure video link activated on the main screen, replacing Hargrove's presentation. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs appeared, his expression grave as he took in the scene before him. Admiral Hargrove, the chairman began without preamble, you have triggered multiple security protocols by attempting to expose an Omega-level operative. Your actions have placed ongoing operations and personnel at risk. Hargrove looked genuinely confused. Operative? Chairman, with all due respect, Commander Thorne is an administrative officer with an inexplicably classified file. My investigation has uncovered suspicious gaps in her service record that warrant explanation. Those gaps, the chairman replied, coincide with missions critical to national security, missions that officially never happened. A side door opened, and Commander Zephyr Thorne entered the room. Gone was the carefully maintained appearance of an unremarkable administrative officer. Her posture, her stride, the very energy she projected had transformed. She moved with the unmistakable presence of someone accustomed to command in the most demanding circumstances. The officers around the table straightened instinctively as she approached. Admiral Hargrove, the chairman continued, Commander Thorne commands Ghost Division, our most classified special operations unit. For 20 years, she has led missions that have prevented conflicts, saved countless lives, and protected American interests in ways that can never be acknowledged publicly. Hargrove stared at Thorne, as if seeing her for the first time. Ghost Division? I've never heard of such a unit. That's the point, Admiral, the chairman said. Some operations are too sensitive, too politically volatile to exist within the conventional military structure. Ghost Division operates under direct authority of a joint task force reporting to the National Security Council. Their existence is classified at a level beyond top secret. Thorne placed a small device on the conference table. It projected a holographic display showing mission files with dates, locations, and outcome assessments. Images flickered, hostage rescues, counterterrorism operations, deep cover infiltrations in territories where American forces officially never operated. Cairo, 2011, Thorne said, her voice steady as she indicated one file. 37 diplomatic personnel extracted after being taken hostage by a non-state actor. Officially, there was no hostage situation. The diplomats were reported as being delayed due to travel complications. She shifted to another file. Montevideo, 2013. Interdiction of a weapons shipment destined for a terror cell planning attacks on 3 major European capitals, officially attributed to a fortunate customs inspection. Another file opened. Sevastopol, 2015. Extraction of a deep cover asset with information that prevented a military confrontation in Eastern Europe. Officially, tensions de-escalated through diplomatic channels. The room was completely silent as the implications sank in. Each incident had been reported in the media as a near miss, a crisis averted through fortunate timing or diplomatic skill. No one had known about the shadow operations that had actually resolved these situations, operations led by the unremarkable commander standing before them. Ghost Division consists of operators selected for their ability to disappear in plain sight, Thorne explained. We maintain cover identities within the conventional military structure, appearing unremarkable by design. Our actual training, capabilities, and missions exist in a parallel record system with the highest possible security classification. Admiral Hargrove sank slowly into his chair, the full weight of his error becoming clear. Why maintain such elaborate covers? Surely there are more efficient ways to structure a covert unit. Because true covert action requires more than simply classified records, Thorne replied. It requires operatives who can move through the world without attracting attention. Who better than officers perceived as unremarkable? Who would suspect the supply officer, the personnel manager, the administrative assistant of being elite operators capable of the most demanding missions? Blackwood stepped forward. There's something else you should know, Admiral. He nodded to Commander Merrick, who reluctantly activated a new file on the display. This is from Cairo, Merrick said quietly. 7 years ago. The image showed a diplomatic reception in flames, wounded personnel being evacuated under fire, Among those being led to safety was a young woman in a torn evening gown, her face partially obscured but still recognizable as Hargrove's niece, Elizabeth, who had been serving as a junior diplomatic attaché at the time. Elizabeth told us she was evacuated by embassy security, Hargrove said, his voice barely above a whisper. She said she never saw who got them out. The operation was classified beyond her clearance, Thorne said. She was instructed to maintain the official cover story, even with family. Blackwood nodded. Ghost Division extracted all 37 hostages without casualties. The extraction team was led personally by Commander Thorne. Hargrove stared at the image, then at Thorne. "You saved my niece's life." "I did my job, Admiral," Thorne replied without emotion, "just as I've done for 17 years. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs cleared his throat. "This security breach must be contained, Admiral. Your investigation has triggered alerts throughout our intelligence community. Operations are being compromised, assets endangered." "I had no idea," Hargrove said, genuine regret in his voice. "I thought I was exposing preferential treatment, not vital national security operations." "Some things stay classified for a reason, Admiral," Thorne said quietly. "Not for glory, for necessity." Hours later, Admiral Hargrove sat alone in his office, contemplating a photograph of his niece at her wedding the previous year. Elizabeth was smiling, full of life and promise, a life made possible by the intervention of a team that officially didn't exist, led by an officer he had publicly humiliated. On his desk lay a letter of resignation, acknowledging his error in judgment and recommending an independent review of his command decisions. His career was effectively over, a fact he had accepted the moment he understood the magnitude of his mistake. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Commander Thorne stood in the doorway, once again wearing the carefully constructed persona of an administrative officer, though Hargrove could now see past the disguise to the true commander beneath. "Enter, Commander," he said, rising to his feet. "Or should I use another title?" "Commander is correct, sir," Thorne replied. "My rank is real, even if my role has been selectively presented." Hargrove gestured to a chair, which Thorne declined with a small shake of her head. "I'm departing within the hour," she explained. "Ghost Division has been compromised. We're implementing contingency protocols." "Because of me," Hargrove said, the weight of responsibility evident in his voice. "Security vulnerabilities are identified and addressed," Thorne replied neutrally. "It's part of operational procedure." Hargrove studied her, seeing beyond the unremarkable exterior to the exceptional officer hidden in plain sight. "Why didn't you ever defend yourself? All those ceremonies, the whispers, the jokes about your lack of visible achievements. You could have shut it down with a word to the right person." "Because the mission matters more than recognition, Admiral," Thorne said simply. "Always has." The truth of her words struck Hargrove with unexpected force. He had spent his career collecting medals, seeking promotions, building a reputation. She had spent hers making sure others could sleep safely, knowing her achievements would never be acknowledged. He rose to his feet and offered a formal salute, the gesture carrying more genuine respect than any he had given in years. "Command should have been yours, Commander. I see that now." Thorne returned the salute with perfect precision. "We each serve in our own way, Admiral." As she turned to leave, Hargrove called after her. "What happens to Ghost Division now?" "We adapt," she answered. "We evolve. We continue." "Under your command?" Something almost like a smile touched the corner of her mouth. "That information is classified, Admiral." In a secure briefing room deep beneath the Pentagon, Commander Thorne addressed the assembled members of Ghost Division for the first time in years. They had always operated independently, communicating through secure channels, meeting only when absolutely necessary. Now, gathered together, they presented a striking image of diverse, capable operators, all bearing the same quality of quiet competence that Thorne herself embodied. "Our cover is compromised," she began without preamble. "The Horizon Protocol has been activated. New identities are being prepared, new positions arranged. We'll be going dark for approximately 60 days while the security breach is contained and new operational parameters established." The team received this news with the calm acceptance of professionals accustomed to adapting to changing circumstances. No complaints, no questions about fairness or recognition. "Despite the breach, our mission continues," Thorne continued, bringing up a secure file on the main display. Intelligence indicates a developing situation in Southeast Asia that will require our attention once we're operational again. Lieutenant Kestrel studied the file with focused intensity. Similar parameters to Montevideo? With additional complications, Thorne confirmed. We'll be operating with minimal support and no official acknowledgement, as usual. She looked around at her team, operators who had sacrificed normal careers, public recognition, even relationships for the sake of missions that would never be acknowledged. The world will never know what we do. That's not why we do it. As they prepared to disperse, each to begin their individual disappearing acts, Thorne's secure communication device signaled an incoming message. The sender was Admiral Hargrove. Your team deserves better. Change is coming. 6 months later, Ghost Division returned from a high-risk extraction in a region where American forces officially had no presence. They had successfully recovered a deep-cover intelligence asset with information critical to national security, sustaining only minor injuries in the process. The mission had been typical of their operations, high-risk, high-value, and completely deniable. What awaited them at their secure facility, however, was anything but typical. The underground bunker had been expanded and modernized. New equipment filled the operations center. Additional support staff worked at advanced communication stations. Medical facilities had been upgraded to field hospital standards. Everything they had needed for years, but had managed without, was suddenly available. As Ghost Division processed this unexpected development, a secure door opened to admit a visitor. The President of the United States entered, accompanied only by Intelligence Officer Blackwood. The team came to attention immediately. The President gestured for them to stand at ease. "Commander Thorne," he said, approaching her directly. "I've been briefed on Ghost Division's operations dating back 20 years. I've reviewed the lives saved, the conflicts prevented, the intelligence secured, all without recognition, without acknowledgement." He nodded to Blackwood, who produced a small case. Inside lay a medal, unlike any in the official record of military decorations. A symbol of service that could never be worn publicly, never be listed on a service record. "Some recognition," the President said, presenting it to Thorne, "even if the world can never know." Thorne accepted the medal with the same calm dignity with which she had accepted every assignment, every risk, every sacrifice throughout her career. "The team is the only recognition any of us need, Mr. President." The President nodded in understanding. "Admiral Hargrove sends his regards. Before his retirement, he implemented several recommendations that have streamlined your resource allocation and operational support. He wanted me to tell you that this was long overdue." As the President departed, Ghost Division prepared for their brief period of rest before the next mission. The world outside continued, unaware of the shadow operations that maintained peace, secured vital intelligence, and occasionally rescued those in harm's way. In the corridor outside the briefing room, a figure waited. Commander Vance Merrick, Hargrove's former protege, who had witnessed firsthand the revelation of Ghost Division's true nature. "Commander Thorne," he said as she emerged, "I've submitted my transfer request, as discussed." Thorne studied him carefully. "You understand what you're asking? This isn't a traditional command. There are no parades, no medals on your uniform, no public acknowledgement of your achievements." "I understand, Commander," Merrick replied. Admiral Hargrove spent 30 years collecting accolades. In the end, he recognized that wasn't what service truly meant. Thorne considered him for a moment longer, then extended her hand. "Ready to disappear, Commander Merrick?" He took her hand with firm resolution. "Yes, ma'am." As they walked toward the planning room, where Merrick would receive his first Ghost Division briefing, they passed a wall lined with photographs. Unlike the public halls of the Pentagon or Naval Academy, these images showed no formal ceremonies, no handshakes with dignitaries. Instead, they captured moments from operations that had saved thousands, operations that would never be in history books. Each photograph represented lives preserved, conflicts averted, threats neutralized, all by operators whose names would never be known to those they protected. This was the true meaning of service, not the glory, not the recognition, but the quiet satisfaction of knowing they had made a difference, even if no one else would ever know. The final image on the wall showed a team returning from a mission, exhausted but successful. Though their faces were obscured for security, their posture conveyed unmistakable pride. Beneath the photograph, a simple inscription read, "The true heroes rarely wear their medals.